Rob's Country and Seed Force, taking New Zealand agriculture into the future. Welcome to this week's Rob's Country. We're going to be looking and finding out who or what the National Trade Academy is. Also having a look at a small farm which is educating city folk about breeds of sheep, cattle, pigs, ducks and whatever. And also, how do you get 140,000 roses to peak for the week of St. Valentine's Day? But first of all, herpesviral myelitis. I got it.
That's right. It's quite topical. Hit the media the last week. It was an incursion, an exotic disease. It was found in a stud farm in the Waikato. So it's topical to talk about, and I think everyone watching maybe should hear a little bit about it.
Absolutely. So, what is it?
Yeah, okay. So it's a disease caused by herpes virus. There's lots and lots of herpes viruses. We have them in the horse population in New Zealand. They're classified as 1, 2, 3 and 4. So there's, we currently have diseases caused by 1 and 4 in New Zealand. And typically they traditionally cause cold type symptoms.
Yes, sort of cold sores.
That's well, just colds in horses, snotty noses. The virus, if you like, that goes through racing stables. And there is one disease caused by the type 1 virus, which causes abortion, which can be vaccinated against. However, there is a very concerning disease, typically in North America and occasionally been seen in the UK and a couple of cases in Australia, and maybe a little bit more common in continental Europe, called herpesviral myelitis, and it's a disease of the spinal cord of the horse.
And this is what's arrived now? That's
what's arrived now. It's a strain of herpes virus type 1, the equine herpes virus type 1. It's a distinct strainal thing, and so up till now we've never seen it. We don't know how it's got into the stud farm.
That was going to be my question. How the hell did it get here?
These horses have been well quarantined. It was a very, very excellently managed stud farm, and so we just don't know how the incursion occurred. The problem with herpes viruses on the whole is that they're almost impossible to get rid of, and so once an animal recovers from disease, these viruses sort of hide. We call it go into recrudescence. So they hide within the body without causing symptoms, and then under periods of stress they reactivate and they come out of hiding and cause disease and start shedding viral particles so other animals can get infected.
I've heard it described as almost taking on your DNA.
Yeah, so it hides away from your immune system, and then when under periods of stress or other disease, they'll just pop up again. So the symptoms of the myelitis, as I said, affecting the spinal cord, there are a couple of typical symptoms that need to be looked out for. One of them is it starts often with just a drunken, wobbly stance in the back end, so almost like a drunken type gait, staggering around in the back end, exactly. Typically the back end.
You're going to look at grass staggers, aren't you, first of all, though? When you think about
although grass staggers typically in horses will occur in all 4 legs rather than the back end. And typically with horses we'll also get problems in urinating. So struggling to urinate, and often that'll present with just little dribbles of urine coming out rather than a full urine stream. So lots and lots of dribbling urine. Pregnant mares seem to be much more at risk of the disease than other classes of horses. We don't know why that is, but again, maybe it's something to do with the immune system. Vaccinations which are available on the market for herpes virus, including EHV or equine herpes virus type 1, which protects against the abortion disease, it seems not to be effective at all. It doesn't protect at all, so there's no cross protection between current vaccination and this particular disease. So we're actually a a critical stage of needing to know if this sort of gets out there, because of course we have a population of horses that have never been exposed, so we've got totally non-immune. So we have the risk that this could turn into a bit of an epidemic. Indeed, in the stud farm I'm talking about, we've had 13 animals affected, and I'm pretty sure, maybe I shouldn't quote it, but I'm pretty sure to date, I think 7 or 8 of those animals have already been euthanized. So typically what will happen is it'll progress and it will result in full paralysis of the animal. And then it can become a sort of welfare issue, and usually the horse is put to sleep basically to preserve its welfare and maintain animal ethics. There are a lot of documented cases where they've been nursed through, but you can imagine the resources and the time and effort that would go through this.
And the risk.
This disease can take up to 3 months if the animal's going to survive for the animal to recover. So, you know, we're talking about a lot of effort, and we really have to be conscious of the welfare.
Do we know how it spreads at all?
Typically by droplet infection, so inhaled through the respiratory route. From the time... Breath. Yeah, so sneezes, coughs, respiratory secretions, air being shared in stables, this sort of thing. From the time of exposure to the virus to the time that symptoms will start, typically around about a week. Can start with mild respiratory signs, but will progress to the wobbliness, and then may progress to dog sitting sort of type posture of the horse as the paralysis starts, and then the paralysis can ascend up the cord and involve all 4 limbs. The brain has been affected on some occasions, and that may present with a funny eye position, maybe the eye pointing in a funny direction, one eye pointing in the opposite direction from another. These sort of strange scenarios like that. Yeah, so very, very, very serious. It looks like it's been contained to date. There's been no cases reported out of this stud farm.
A huge quarantine, no doubt.
Absolutely, and actually all credit to the stud farm involved, a lot of effort by them and a lot of investment financially by them as well in managing this outbreak securely. So to date there's been no cases seen out of this initial outbreak farm. But it is very timely for people to be aware of this that have anything to do with horses. And if you've got a strange lameness or a wobbly horse or whatever, perhaps something that you may have been in a position to think, well, let's just see what happens over the next few days. It may be more timely than ever to contact your vet, or to even ring the MPI these days,
That's right,
the MPI hotline, exotic disease hotline, just to talk things over, because it is a very timely phase of any disease outbreak, and of course we want to contain this thing.
We cannot afford that. I mean, it's the mad cows of horses, isn't it? So, ooh, can you keep in touch with that one?
We will.
Okay,
yeah,
thank you very much indeed. After the break, we find out who the National Trade Academy is, and believe me, they're doing some really good things, incidentally, mainly with horses. Welcome back to Rob's Country. Well, trading, as far as people are concerned for our industry, not all that great, but there's an opportunity for people with an interesting history, not very long, but by gosh, they're making some inroads.
We established the National Trade Academy in January 2000. We found there was a need for pre-employment training. Too many young people leaving school, going into the industry, having a bad experience and being lost for the future. So we started with our first dairy farming course, and it's grown since then. And now we run about 7 different courses, from agriculture, animal care, equine, landscaping with horticulture, and we've got students from high schools going right through to those that have already left school.
So if you look at the equine, for example, there's some success stories there as well.
There is. Just about all of our students that have actually completed the courses have gone either into employment or self-employment, and anything from riding instructors through to working in saddleries, grooms, the racing industry. And we've just had some really good success. And of course, Jess, one of our lead instructors now, she's won 2 championships just recently, has 2 New Zealand titles. and we're quite proud of her.
You'd be very proud of her.
We are. She's done very, very well, and she started off as a student and has just grown in her skills, and now she's teaching, and so she's able to impart her knowledge back to the students for this year.
Are you able to sort of help people find jobs?
Oh, we do. We have an employment consultant on staff, and his role is to find students jobs on dairy farms and in the sheep farming industry. Within the equine industry, our own staff have their own contacts. So both Lee, who is the stable manager for the riding school, and Jess have their own contacts that they have been in touch with during the year with work experience. And so we have a job board, and so all the jobs are put up through the year as they come up. Obviously, we want the students to get the qualification first. That's the focus of the government funding now, is to get the students a qualification, and then the job comes after that.
Because after 14 years, you'd be getting a lot of ticks from employers, I would have thought. I mean, you're established.
We're starting to get a name out there. It's all through word of mouth, a lot of it. There's only so much money you can spend on the advertising, but putting good qualified students out there. And now we have farmers coming back and actually putting in their orders, sort of, so to speak, for the next year or for the next season. And Hamish, who does our employment consultancy, must have at least 30 jobs lined up for the next season already. We have international students as well, because we can't meet the demand with domestic students. We do advertise, and we work with the schools, we work with the career advisors, trying to make them realise there is a pathway in agriculture now. 15, 20 years ago, I would have said there wasn't the same pathway, but now with the larger corporate farms, you can stay on the same farm and become a herd manager without having to change, and we've seen evidence of that. You've got companies like Synlait that we're currently working with, Dairy Farm Holdings, so there's a lot of big employers out there that come to us now for their staff for the new season.
And it's great that you're actually teaching jockeys, so I mean they don't have to go to a stable and find that it's not working.
Well, exactly, they get to try it here first. And so we teach them the skills here, we teach them about the working conditions, they get to experience it. If they don't make it on the course, they're never going to make it in the industry. And it's the same with the dairy farming. If they don't like it on course, they're never going to make it in the industry. So in a way, we're saving the farmers and the employers time and money, because they're not going to start with them and 3 or 4 weeks later find this is not for me. We actually prepare them well for what can be expected on the farm.
How long are the courses?
They range from 12 weeks to a full academic year, and depends on the program, depends on the level of the qualification. And with the high school programs, which we have the Land-Based Trade Academy, which is a secondary tertiary alignment with the high schools, where they do 3 days of the week at school. They're doing their literacy, numeracy, science, 3 subjects, and then they do their other subject here with us Thursdays and Fridays. So it's a chance for them to get a vocational qualification, part of the vocational pathways, and basically, you know, for those students that are more hands-on, more practical, agriculture or equine or animal care is like another subject. And those credits they achieve go towards their NCA level 2.
It's not just for youngsters though. I'd imagine if somebody in their 20s wanted to change vocation.
We used to have that option, but with funding changes, we no longer have that option here. We're applying for more funding. We hope to get it, but we have limitations on who we can actually enrol at the moment.
So it will be youngsters.
And at the moment, it's those 15 to 19-year-olds is our focus.
So you mentioned funding.
Yeah, well, you'd always like more. At the moment, we are limited to what they call Youth Guarantee, which is a free fees. We are unable to take anybody over 19 at this stage. We're working with the Tertiary Education Commission to put a case to them for more funding, so that we can actually take people who want to change careers. But at the moment, we're limited to those that are under 19.
We'll watch this space.
I hope we're going to go further.
And I'm very, very sure they will. It'll be a great asset. Well, it already is a great asset, but even more so if they could take those over 19s. We'll have more for you, including Federated Farmers, straight after the break. Back to Rob's Country. And you're planning for winter fodder crops. You wouldn't necessarily expect federated farmers to be in amongst that, but you are.
Well, we are. Best practice, best farming practice is what we're all about these days, and it seems a bit strange in the middle of summer to talk about winter fodder crops, but...
Not at all. We've got Warren Green coming later in the program as well, and he'll tell us about it.
Oh, there you go. But most farmers will be, in Canterbury anyway, will be putting them in the next 4 or 6 weeks. Some of them further around in colder parts might have already started thinking about it. So now's the time to do a little bit of planning around fodder crops. Not only what you're going to plant and how much, but also whereabouts on the farm and how you're going to have the layout. It actually can make quite a difference in terms of not only how much of your fodder crop you can utilise, but also your animal welfare and your effects on the environment.
And this is your runoffs and all that sort of thing as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. So, you know, there are a few things to think about. Waterways, it's a big one. In a lot of places in New Zealand now, you're not allowed to have your cattle in waterways, particularly if you're intensive feeding. So it's quite important to make sure that when you lay it out, you can fence off, put the hot wire around any creeks and streams you've got, and not just the permanently flowing ones, but also thinking about those gullies and ditches that it might be quite dry now, but in the middle of winter they're going to have water in them.
That's a very good thought, because you only really worry about a leaking roof when it rains, and I mean, it's the same scenario, isn't it, really?
I was at a beef and lamb conference at the end of last year, a really, really good one, talking about winter feeding, and they had this beautiful picture in Southland somewhere of these cows, and they were standing on the mud here, and the turnips were over there, and in between them was this lovely big ditch of quite fierce flowing water.
Yee. And seriously, that is exactly what we have to avoid because of the downstream flow-on effects, for want of a better term.
Exactly, there's that. And also, if you think about it, you just add to your own mud problems if you've got your cattle having to run through waterways to get to on and off the break. They get muddy enough as it is.
Yep, and scald between the toes and all that sort of
thing.
Now, slopes is what you're also leading in towards slopes, aren't you?
Slopes, absolutely, is something else to think about. As our machinery's got better and better, we're finding fodder crops on all sorts of places that you wouldn't have seen them at all 20 years ago. And a lot of easy hill country is now planted up, which is just another thing to think about. It's great while the plants are there, but what happens when they're fed off? And the last thing you want is half your hill slope disappearing when it rains. Not only, again, is that not great for people downstream in the waterways, but you're actually losing your natural capital, disappearing, your fertiliser, your soil, it's all disappearing off those slopes. So I would sort of urge farmers to think about, you know, is the slope the best place, or are you better to try and put those fodder crops on the flats and use the slopes as your runoff blocks?
Because the runoffs is another whole story, because you're feeding that hard feed onto that as well, aren't you?
Yes, and runoffs is another one really to have a good think about. If you can have a runoff block on permanent pasture cover for each of your breaks, then they work magic. You just put those that livestock on for the 3 or 4 hours you want to feed them and put them back onto some permanent pasture. You're not only reducing your mud, you're reducing your nitrate leaching. You've got better access if you've got wet weather. Snow, you know, and you're into your hay or your baiters, you can just shut the break up till it dries out and feed them off. So runoff paddocks are really good if you can have the land to do it, but of course that's then when your whole planning comes in, because if you're going to have a runoff paddock for each fodder crop, then you have to think about where you're planting them.
So you're looking at sort of having a runoff in the middle and fodder crops all around, as an example.
Yes, yeah, or you know, a gate out and one runoff fodder crop here and a runoff paddock there and a gate between the two. And of course you've got to think about where that gate is too, because you want your stock to be able to run from your runoff paddock onto your fodder crop up towards where you've put the break. You don't want to have the gate down the other end. No.
This is really, a lot of this you're talking about is just nitrate management as well, isn't it, and leaching and getting stuff right.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that we have to think about now with fodder crops, and that is whether you're compliant with your nitrate losses in a lot of places, including Otago and Canterbury. Southland are coming, a few places in the North Island, and if you haven't done dairy support or winter dairy grazing before, and you're looking to do it now, then you really do need to talk to the council and talk to your farm advisor about whether you're going to have the nitrate baselines that you need to be able to undertake that activity. Nitrate leaching from cattle is a lot higher than sheep. So if you're a sheep and beef farmer, unless you are running a really high cattle ratio, then you might not have the nitrate loading that you need to be able to take on dairy support.
Because this is the other thing, is they're doing testing now, and they're saying you can't buy that land, or you can buy it, but you can't use it for this, or you can't use it for that. That's
right, and that's a really important thing. The wider farm industry is starting to catch up with what's going on, but we're by no means completely au fait with everything yet. So still seeing land advertised as potential dairy support and dairy conversion and bits and pieces. Some of them up my way, I look at them and go, I'm not sure that is, because I know what the rules are. But again, you know, it's going to be a bit like water. You don't buy a block that's advertised as irrigated until you've seen the water consent, you know you've got the water that you need for your land. It's going to be exactly the same with nitrates. When you look to buy a piece of land, you're going to have to know what that nitrate baseline is and whether it's big enough for what you want to do before you invest.
So basically, is it really the buyer who's got to do that? He or she has to go through the protocols and...
Well, a smart seller who's keen to sell their land will hopefully provide you with a nitrogen baseline for the land as part of the information
that sort of whole package that they do with the limits and everything else.
Exactly. The other thing you can do is, if they haven't done a nitrogen baseline, if you get a good land use history of what they've been doing on the land, then you can calculate the nitrogen baseline yourself.
Because it's too late once you bought it.
It's too late once you bought it.
And
absolutely.
And that's the guarantee to be able to do dairy support isn't necessarily there.
That's right, and the last thing you want to do is pay $44,000 a hectare or more for some land that you think you can do a dairy conversion or full-blown dairy support on, only to find that you can't.
No. Stress is something else we'll talk about on another day.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much indeed. And thank you, because I didn't realise that you guys were actually in there supporting people doing all those things as well.
Absolutely, and heaps of further information on both Dairy NZ and Beef and Lamb's websites.
Done. Brilliant. St Valentine's Day. Once a year, the romantics go mad. But for somebody like Steve Moffat from Moffat's Flowers, how do you get 140,000 blooms to peak for one Pacific weekend?
Biggest week of the year for us, yes, Valentine's Day, yeah. Wonderful week.
So how do you get the flowers to all arrive and peak at the same time?
It's a lot of technique, Rob. We're start thinking about Valentine's Day in December, and late in the month we cut all the reds back, so it means that we throw away a bloom to produce a bloom for Valentine's Day. So, and hopefully if we time it right, we'll get those flowers all coming for this week. And then of course in 6 weeks those flowers come back, and then we have to cut back half of those again to get them out of that flush situation. So it really cost us 2.5 roses to produce one of these for Valentine's Day.
Is it supply and demand, isn't it?
Yes, it is, yes. And Valentine's Day still seems to have some growth in it. It looks as though, especially for this year, when it's at the end of the week, it's always better than the beginning of the week. And it's a fun day. It's not to be taken too seriously, but it's a good day.
Stephen, have you got any idea of how many you would produce and how many you're likely to sell?
Probably out of here we will produce about, of red roses, about 70,000, 80,000 blooms, and probably about the same in other colours as well.
Obviously they go nationwide.
Yes, yeah, we used to export a lot of flowers, but that's all gone by the board now. So no, we're very much relying on Kiwis and Kiwi buying power and Kiwis buying local. There are imported roses that come to the country that have got to do a long shipment period. They also have to dip them in weed killer to get them into the country, and the Kiwis need to be assured that by whoever they're buying from, that they are buying New Zealand roses.
So in supermarkets and florist shops, we can say you're allowed to ask, and if it's some office rose, you're okay.
Well, exactly. Yes, dead right. And as long as they're buying kiwi, that's fantastic.
So the other thing, of course, is just the logistics. You seem to have a lot of staff there at the moment.
There's a lot of processing, and it's all got to be done over a short period. And that's the difficult thing, is to our Valentine's Day finishes on the 12th, and Valentine's Day is actually on the 14th. But between now and the 12th, so 9, 10, 11, 12 is a pretty busy time for us.
And you are able to sell them all. Could you supply more?
I think that we pretty much sell out on Valentine's Day. Yes, we do, and it could be bigger, but we think we've got the balance pretty well right.
It's a lovely thing, isn't it? I mean, roses are beautiful, and just the romantic side of St. Valentine's Day and red roses.
It's fantastic, it is, and I think if the New Zealand Mail actually worked out that women like getting flowers, it would be fantastic for everybody.
Because we know we can do that, can't we? We Kiwi blokes.
We Kiwi blokes can. Well, look at me.
Because the personal question is, your wife would see right through you if you came home with a bunch of red roses.
You would be surprised. You would be surprised. My wife, if I take flowers at any time home to her, she thinks it's marvellous. So if you could extrapolate that across the New Zealand Kiwi population, if I can do it, then anybody can do it.
Wee bit about your operation. You took a real big serve during the earthquakes, but you're back at 100 miles an hour again.
Yep, yeah, that was a pretty hard 3 years, no question about that. But we're back on track, and as you say, we're raring to go again.
And hope you've had an absolutely wonderful Valentine's Day. And it is okay for boys to get roses as well, apparently. We won't go there, though. That's another subject altogether after the break. We'll be talking to Warwick Green. Back to this week's program. Ryegrass, let's start working our way through. We heard a wee bit about brassicas and things for the winter, but let's hit ryegrass.
How are you, Rob? Anyway, it's nice to be here in 2014 again.
It's been a while.
But the months go round. It's a busy time of year, obviously, for us. It's the crucial autumn planting period from now through sort of the next couple of months. And obviously, 90% of our pasture-based system is based on ryegrass, and so farmers are out there at the moment. They're making a lot of decisions, and what to sow and what not to sow and what they should be doing. So it's, for a seed company like Seedforce, it's a critical time, and we've put a lot of our brochures out around in a farmer drop. So most farmers, if they should have received that in the mail in the last week or two. And we've focused on a couple of things. One on short-term options, so that's sort of winter feed type specific feed options, but also more on the persistent species. So primarily in that we're talking about ryegrass, but talking about other species as well. So if we look at ryegrass, there's a couple of messages that get quite confused, Rob, out there at the moment. One relates to perennial ryegrass in terms of making sure it's a true perennial. And obviously the expectations from a farmer with the word perennial is it's going to persist. So that's been quite a concern, and a lot of feedback over the last 18 months, couple of years, farmers saying, hey, some of these new varieties don't persist. And then we've got linked to that this issue of endophyte, and so novel endophytes have been developed, and so the ryegrass and the endophyte together are supposedly the key thing to give the enhanced persistence. I'm
going to stop you there because there's so much confusion about endophyte, whether you have a higher one, a low one, what it is, how it works.
Yeah, there is.
And bottom line is, could you just unravel it a bit for us?
I think we will, and I think it's really topical. So let's just start with the ryegrass plant, okay, perennial ryegrass. And let's just use the similarity to a car. The critical part of a car, whether we like it or not, is the chassis. And if we look at the chassis as the perennial ryegrass, the important part of that is the genetics. So how it's been bred, whether it's been bred with attributes of winter growth or deeper roots or longer persistence capability. They are all the attributes that are built up in the genetics of the plant. And I think the first thing that farmers should look at is ignore everything else and ask the question, has this variety been tested for a long enough period to demonstrate its persistence? Now, a lot of the pasture trials that we do in New Zealand only go for 3 years, okay? Now, one good question, and rightly so, that's probably not long enough. Ever since we've started off, we've tended to run our trials 6 plus 7 years, so we can prove that these jolly things persist. And so with likes of Stella, we're demonstrating excellent persistence. So that's one of its real strengths. And then you look at it right across the country, that's trials across the country, you can identify the persistence of the variety. And linked to that then is the performance of the variety. And that's information that's available through different websites, through information on dry matter production. Now, dry matter is the amount of yield you get, the amount of grass it grows.
This is the amount of power you get from the motor.
Well, effectively, yes.
I'll come back to the car thing.
And so you've got to link the two things together. There's no point in having all the yield, but in 12 months' time you're faced with replanting that paddock again. So it's a matter of balancing all that together. So, okay, the farmer makes his or her decision based on the genetics. He likes that variety. It might even be that the varieties perform well on their farm to date. Then they have the choice of endophyte option. So if we look at New Zealand, the key reason for having endophyte is to offer some resistance to specific insects. The first one developed, or the major pest, is Argentine stem weevil.
Yep.
Now we have Argentine stem weevil pretty much across the country, probably not a lot in Southland, but from sort of Otago north, and the warmer it gets, the more life cycles it has in a year. So in Canterbury, you're getting sort of one life cycle a year of Argentine stem weevil. In the North Island and Waikato and Northland, you're getting 2 or 3 cycles. So it's a rampant little beast. And so that is doing enormous damage in eating and destroying pastures. So AR1 is the endophyte that will has got certain chemicals in it that when it's put in ryegrass plant, it'll give you total tolerance to Argentine stem weevil. And in the North Island, and that really works pretty effectively right across the country, except in areas where black beetle is a problem. So that's in some years, it's not every year, but in maybe 1 year in 4 or 5, you get a lot of black beetle in the northern part of the North Island.
Or the beetle?
Well, obviously the larvae and then the beetle. So the AR1 won't combat against that. So therefore they developed other endophytes specifically for that, like NEA2, like AR37, those sort of endophytes. Grub out, some of those sort of endophytes. Now, they are used in specific areas and especially in that northern region, okay? Now, but one of the fallacies is that a lot of farmers are saying, can I please, they walk into their retailer and they say, can I have some of that endophyte stuff? And they don't talk about the variety. So they forget about the chassis. All the endophyte is the motor. It's the motor that you put on the chassis to make it sort of perform a little bit better. Being a car expert yourself, Rob, you'll know exactly what that means. But, you know, if you haven't got the chassis right, the jolly motor may not perform. So, you know, if you've got the genetics where the variety hasn't got persistent traits, then it doesn't matter what endophyte you put in, it's not going to persist any better.
I'm going to come back to you after the break, but in the meantime I'd like to introduce you to an interesting little farm. It's a show farm for children which grew out of the earthquakes here in Christchurch.
The history of the park is we decided after the earthquake that we would open up the few animals that we did have at that time so that some families and children could come out here and have a more relaxing time than they'd had before, mainly from the east side. So we had a bus that we would go and pick them up and bring them out to here, and they could spend any length of time out here and sort of recoup, I suppose.
Nature's a great healer.
It is, and that was the main sort of start of it all. And then we decided that we thought we'd only be open for a short period of time, and then we'd sort of go back to developing it, but that didn't work out. People didn't want us to stop, so we haven't actually closed since then. We've had winters where we've closed and done stuff, but we've just kept on going since then. So we initially charged $5 per person, and just to cover the feed and things like that, and we've stayed at that. So maybe in the long term we'll put the prices up a little bit, but the aim is to have it so just families can come out here and come quite often if they would like to.
And it's really just a case of meeting animals and patting a horse and tickling a rabbit under the chin.
Yeah, they can come out and play with the animals, have a wee pony ride. They can get right into the pens with most of our animals and touch them and feed them and do jobs with them. We do have our round circle and square that the rabbits are out running around, and so the little children can sit in there and spend a long time in there playing with them.
Which they would do.
Yeah.
How did you pick the sort of animals?
The main bulk of our animals are the common farm breeds in New Zealand. So we're sort of aiming at, say, the Merino for a start, and then we have the Southdown, which was our meat breed animal for the frozen.
Yep.
Frozen
export.
Yeah, and so we've sort of gone on from there, but now we've also got a few of the more lifestyle block sheep, so we have Dorpers and Wiltshires and that sort of thing. So we're just moving the whole thing along so you can see the history of farming. So
it's not just a display, you bring students in as well. How does that work?
Yes, we have different groups of students that come, some from high school where they're still Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday are still at school, and then Thursday, Friday they come here. They do a national certificate, level 2 in animal care. And then we have youth guarantee students who are students who have left school, and they spend 4 days a week here doing the same national certificate. So, and we also have some from the correspondence school that do the same thing.
And I guess it's an opportunity for youngsters to see if they're going to like it or not.
Well, that's right, and it's almost farming anyway. I mean, I know it's just animal care, but the majority of our stuff is large animals, so they can transition to the agriculture if they would like to do that. So it's more about the care. We don't sort of do pastures and stuff like that, although that does touch on it, of course, when you're feeding out. But it's mostly the care and husbandry of animals. So.
And it works in very well with Next Doors, the training academy.
Yes, yep, and that's how it sort of all ties together. So, yeah.
So funding, you've got a lot of building and a lot of feeding to be done.
We do, yes. We have quite a rostered system. We're always changing the roster because of sort of different things that happen. But mostly we have students and volunteers that come and help us, especially the weekends. It's awesome having so many people coming out to give us a hand and stuff like that. So it's a real little community now.
And people still keep on coming out to come and visit. Weekends must be pretty busy.
Weekends are good, yeah. They're very, very busy, especially when the weather's nice. And it would be nice to have something like a big barn one day where we can not worry about the weather, but it's part and parcel of farming, so that's okay.
And it'll come.
It'll come, yes.
Sure it will. After the break, we're going to go back to talking with Warwick Green about Seed Force and other things that we should really be hanging on every word over. He's back. Well, legumes, then I want to talk to you about cocksfords and other persistent grasses, but let's start with legumes.
Well, it's interesting, Rob. In the last couple of weeks there's been some open farmer field days through the North Island, east coast of North Island, mainly focused on lucerne, and there's an enormous swell of interest in lucerne as a species, and also as a, I suppose, as a drought legume, as well as
those tap roots.
Yeah, but as well as an extremely valuable forage. You know, very, very high quality forage. So there's quite a lot of interest in how farmers can integrate lucerne in a bigger part of their farming system, and a lot of work done in Marlborough over the last probably 5 or 10 years has demonstrated how, you know, it could become one of your main species in your farming operation. But you have to develop the right rotation and the way to use it. So lucerne's gaining enormous interest. I mean, there's a couple of key things. One, it fixes its own nitrogen, so that's jolly good. Better than out of the bag.
Exactly.
But, and of course, in all the issues we face at the moment,
regional councils love it.
Some of your previous guests talking about nitrate and all these things. I mean, they're important things. So lucerne's something you can plant in the autumn. So if farmers are looking at wanting to get lucerne, get to your retailer, look at the varieties, and obviously things like Force 4. You know, it would be the leading variety in the country at the moment. So those sort of things, planting probably late February through March. Don't leave it too much later. And you know, you can get all the information you need on management off our website and through our brochures. The other legume that, you know, with autumn planting and pasture mixes is to look at something like the subclover. Now that's been something that probably you and I have heard about for many, many years, but it's coming back again. And we've invested a lot of money in an Australian program to look at improving subclovers. And so we're bringing in new varieties that have got a tolerance to an earth mite, which is a red-legged earth mite. So, you know, a red-legged earth mite's pretty common in Australia, and I'm afraid we've got it here. It's come across the ditch. So important for farmers to select varieties that have got tolerance to red-legged earth mite, and there's really only a couple available at the moment. So one of those is Rosabrook, which is available. So they can integrate subclover into their mix, probably 3 to 5 kilos to the hectare. Put that in your pasture mix as a complementary legume. Really good for the spring. Obviously, the other one, if you're looking at putting in addition to traditional white clover, would be a bit of red clover. So think about your legume component, not only your grass component, because it's the legume that drives a lot of the quality in the pasture and drives a lot of the animal performance. So critical to have that, Rob.
And it cuts down you having to use urea, doesn't it? If you've got it mixed in to a degree.
You know, a white clover plant can fix, you know, when it's mature, it can fix, you know, a couple of 100 kilos of nitrogen per year. Now that's pretty good, my dear friend, in terms of the amount of jolly ryegrass it will actually help grow.
Speaking of old crops that have been rejuvenated and brought back in a different form, looking fabulous, cocksford.
Well, cocksford's been to hell and back, I suppose, but in terms of a species, if we go back 100 years, all the peninsula was covered in cocksford. Still is a lot of it.
A lot of farmers have bought and paid off with cocksford.
Exactly, and was used across much of the Canterbury Plains. As a species, it went through a period of decline because of its palatability. It used to choke out a lot of legume. Clumped, and really farmers weren't interested in it. RAGT, our partner, have a cocksford program that's light years ahead of anything anywhere else in the world. They have developed really a totally different form of cocksford. It's upright, it's open, it doesn't clump, very palatable, and you plant it as a pure sward in many parts of the tougher country, and a lot of parts of Europe are now using a lot of cocksford.
Because your sowing rates are pretty high. I mean, it's totally different to what it used to be.
Correct. You know, in the old days, 1 or 2 kilos was plenty. Now we're talking 6-7 kilos in a pasture mix, bump it up, cut your ryegrass down, increase your Coxford, and these new modern species are just performing fantastically. And so the Greenley is the one that you want to grab hold of and really have a run with it. We sell an enormous amount in Australia. You can even fly it on and use the hoof and tooth method to get it in, and if you're in hill country, or you can plant it as part of your pasture mix. And it's extremely palatable. If you look at the quality, it's pretty good. It's right up there, not like the old varieties that tended to be much more clumpy.
So basically there's a lot of options now for people, yes. And they should really talk to, well, I'm not being silly, but talk to one of your boys, for
yes,
example.
Yes, they should. Yeah, I mean, we've got a number of people all around the country. That information is readily available. They can contact us. Our field, technical field reps are trained agronomists. They are fully available to help farmers and work through their retailer, come on farm, provide the advice and help them with their pasture renewal program.
And there's no commitment, that's there for free advice?
Absolutely free. And you know, I really would ask that farmers think about that, because you know, we've invested a lot to get these people out there, and they're good, experienced people, and yeah, they should use it.
Mark, thank you very much indeed. It's not very often that you get a chance to get free advice with no fish hooks and no hooks at all, in fact. Just remember, if it ain't in a green bag, it ain't a Seed Forward seed. We're looking at the Seed Force number now coming on to your screen. I'm Rob Cope-Williams. You've either been watching or you have just missed Rob's Country Widow. We'll be back at the same time next week. Until then, bye now. Seed Force. If it's not in the green bag, it's not a Seed Force seed.